Okay, our program tonight, as most of you know, is about the prospect of a much larger facility at the Los Angeles International Airport. Mayor Reardon and the Los Angeles City Council are determined, or have been determined, to increase by over 50% the number of passengers handled, number of passengers and the freight being handled at LAX. Opposing the expansion, the Monterey Park City Council voted, as I understand it, unanimously to oppose the expansion and to join forces with the cities of El Segundo, Santa Monica, Culver City, and the regional transportation agencies of San Bernardino and Riverside counties. To bring us up to date on the status of the opposition campaign under the ad hoc committee for a truly regional airport plan, fortunate to have with us tonight Zane. Dennis is the owner of Urban Dimensions. He's a consultant with the El Segundo organizing the opposition to expansion of LAX and the support for a truly regional airport plan. Former mayor and 12-year city councilman in Santa Monica, former executive director of a coalition for clean air, and former member of the California State Democratic Central Committee. Would you please give a very warm welcome to our guest speaker, Dennis Zane.
Thank you very much for taking this evening, a Friday evening on the cusp of a holiday weekend. That must be one of the most significant organizing challenges of anybody's lifetime, to generate an audience at all on that weekend. So I'm very appreciative of your presence, of the efforts of your leadership to bring you all together, and of your interest in this issue, because it is an issue that truly affects all of us, not only those who are immediately adjacent to the airport, the communities of El Segundo and Inglewood, for example, and other communities in the South Bay, but also the communities throughout the region, either those like your own that's under the flight path or those that are in the traffic impact zone of LAX. Indeed, all of those who have a stake in a rational and environmentally responsible regional economy have a stake in the development of a truly regional airport plan rather than the plan as proposed by the City of Los Angeles. I'm going to run through a bit of a presentation that we use when we go out to communities and build the coalition that we've been working on. But to give you a brief update, I think when we started this effort, communities, really everybody, including the City of Los Angeles, no doubt thought that we were whistling in the wind and had little chance to be successful in our efforts, because everybody just assumed that the City of Los Angeles was too big, too powerful, to, in fact, be prevented from moving in the direction that they might choose. I think we've demonstrated that, in fact, there is no such thing as an invulnerable party as long as there is a willingness on the part of people to consider the issues soberly and to express their genuine convictions and their own self-interest and to stand up for what they believe. Your community here in Monterey Park has joined that effort and stood up for what it believes, and it is now, I think, one of about 65 cities, counties, and agencies in Southern California that have adopted a resolution opposing the expansion of LAX and calling for a truly regional airport plan. That fact has really brought this process to a much different place than I think the proponents may have expected when they began their effort more than 2 years ago. They are now, we have been told, quite frankly, rather in disarray in their efforts. The mayor of Los Angeles had called for the resignation of Jack Driscoll, who had been the airport director for quite some time, a gentleman actually we had come to respect and enjoy and thought of as a genuine public servant doing his best on a matter that we disagreed with, but nevertheless an honorable person. And he's been forced out of his position because of the success of our efforts in building a regional opposition coalition. And of course, they will take some months to find somebody to replace them. We've also been told that they are considering withdrawing their plan and are now looking for other options to put on the table, perhaps a smaller plan. We don't know quite yet. Now, those are much in the way of the rumor mills, but I think we have heard this from pretty good sources. All of which is to say, you can fight City Hall, any City Hall, and can expect to win in a democratic society if you have both the commitment, do it well, do it smartly, and have, in effect, as we do, I believe, history on your side. Let me show you why I believe that's the case. I have with me, by the way, an associate of mine with Urban Dimensions, Mary Beth Vergara, who has been working with me for a year now on this campaign. And with us also is Mike Stevens, who is a leading activist in the community of Inglewood in opposing the expansion of LAX, and a member of the Los Angeles County Democratic Central Committee from the 51st District. He and I together worked together to pass a resolution opposing the expansion of LAX at the LA County Democratic Central Committee. But if you cast your eyes to the east, see, this first shows you what it is that LAX proposes to do. They want to grow from their current 60 million passengers per year to over 98 million passengers per year. And that's about a 60% growth in passenger traffic. They want to grow from really 1.8 million tons, that's a mistake there, 1.8 million tons of cargo to over 4.8 million tons of cargo, more than doubling the cargo activity, and of course significantly increasing the diesel truck traffic in the area, which we have only recently learned diesel exhaust has been declared a toxic carcinogen by the California Air Resources Board. That amounts to 2,000 flights today now to 3,000 flights per day if they succeed. 3,000 flights today is roughly one flight taking off or landing at LAX every 25 seconds. That's serious activity. We believe that the scale of this proposed expansion for LAX defies effective mitigation. This cannot be mitigated. There will simply be an overwhelming impact on neighboring communities, those under the flight path, those in the traffic impact zone. Questions that communities that neighbor LAX ask are very straightforward. They want to know, is it safe, is it fair, is it prudent, and is it necessary? We believe not. It's not safe, not only because of overhead traffic from increased overhead traffic in the airspace, crowding our airspace, but also because LAX is already the single largest source of NOx emissions. NOx is a key ingredient in the formation of ozone and a key ingredient in the formation of particulate matter. LAX generates 3 times more NOx than the 3 largest stationary sources combined, all of which are oil refineries, and 3.5 times the NOx generated by all MTA buses. There's LAX NOx right there per year. Look at the Mobil refinery, the Chevron refinery, and the Arco refinery. They are all quite a bit less. Even in total, they are less than LAX, and MTA is less than 1/3 of LAX's NOx. As an air quality planner myself for many years, as leader of the Coalition for Clean Air, NOx is the single most important pollutant that air quality regulators try to control. In addition, when SCAG did its forecasting based upon the projected regional growth in the region, they had determined that stretches of the 405 were already expected to have a congested average speed of 16 to 23 miles per hour now, would slow to 10 to 16 miles per hour in 20 years with current traffic growth, unless something different is done. And those projections do not include new traffic expected to be generated by LAX. We will have close to gridlock in that corridor. And of course, that will ripple throughout the region's freeway system. We asked the question whether it's fair to expand LAX when it disproportionately burdens a small number of communities, when it worsens the environmental justice in the region because the communities which bear the greatest burden are communities of color and communities of low-income members. And environmental justice, principles of environmental justice says that such communities should not have to bear special environmental burdens for the sake of the rest of us. Many other such communities, such as those in the Inland Empire and other parts of the region, which have airports of their own to develop, also are denied that opportunity by the expansion of LAX, because LAX will gobble up the money and it will gobble up the interests of the airlines. It is indeed unfair, in fact, that this decision really is to be made by one body. The City of Los Angeles, nearly 4 million people, in a region of some 16 million people, alone has the authority to make this decision. We think that is quite unfair and not very democratic. The question, is it prudent to spend $12 to $15 billion expanding LAX when you can build out a regional system, as we show you, for less than 1/4 of that cost? The reason for that is that LAX will have to do dramatic changes in its runway system, as well as adding new terminals. Their current proposal, in effect, requires them to tear up 4 runways and build 5 runways in order to move forward and create a new one. It is a very, very expensive undertaking. The other regional airports we will share with you have already existing runways. Most have existing terminals. They can accommodate the same growth in air commerce without such an extraordinary expense. To put this in context, when Senator Burton proposed a major bond measure to finance the reconstruction of most of the sagging California transportation infrastructure, he proposed $16 billion. They proposed to spend nearly that much on one project. Of course, the question, is it necessary to expand LAX when the capability for capturing our air commerce exists at multiple other airports in Southern California, and when these airports operate in areas are expected to experience the greatest growth in the region in both population and employment, and when these airports are regarded by these regions as essential to their economic future, is it fair that is it necessary for LAX to gobble up all this opportunity? And the answer to that is clearly, we believe, no. It's not safe, it's not fair, it's not prudent, and it's not necessary. We think that Southern California needs what we call a truly regional airport plan. The mayor of Los Angeles has been talking like he's in support of a regional solution as well, but when he talks that way, he merely means the airports that the City of Los Angeles owns. As important as they are not the only airports in the region. Other communities, some communities call for a regional plan because they don't want to bear the burden of an expanded LAX, but many other communities do so because they want a fair opportunity to develop their own airports. We believe that it can be shown, in fact, we will release a report in the not very distant future showing that you can, with a regional system, get comparable regional economic benefits, comparable jobs created, with far less environmental burdens, far less, as I said, about 1/4 the cost, and much greater fairness. Important caveat is that there are airports in the system other than LAX and Ontario and El Toro. There is Burbank, George, John Wayne, Long Beach, March, Norton, Palmdale, Palm Springs, and Point Mugu. Some of these, like George, for example, like March, Norton, and Point Mugu, and El Toro, are opportunities created by the winding down of the Cold War. They are existing airport facilities. March itself has the longest continuous runway in the region. These are airports that have their runway facilities. They will need adaptation for passengers, but it's a far less costly proposition to gear up those airports to serve the role, to meet the commerce needs of our region than it is to build out LAX the way they propose. Some will play passenger airports. Some, like March and George, really only want to be cargo airports. All of them have a desire. Some like, say, perhaps Burbank or Long Beach, won't have a desire to grow at all, but will simply continue to play their current role. This is some important information to share with you. Our research, this data comes from the Southern California Association of Governments. High growth regions of Southern California are San Bernardino County, West Riverside County, North LA County, and the Coachella Valley. Those regions, you can see, have 6 underutilized airports. Those airports, Ontario has some significant activity. Palm Springs has some activity in the high tourist times of the years, but other airports are otherwise either unused or underutilized, and yet these are dramatically the high growth areas. They will grow by between, some of them like North LA County will almost triple, others will nearly double in population. In fact, the total growth for those regions are about 3.5 million people. When they say that there is going to be 2 new Chicagos added to the population of Southern California in the next 20 years, well, one of those Chicagos is going to be in the Inland Empire. That will double the population of the Inland Empire. They have 5 airports out there that they believe they ought to have the opportunity to develop. By comparison, if you take the communities which are closest to Los Angeles, to LAX, including Los Angeles itself, and you look at their population growth, in total it's less than half of the growth expected in these parts of the region. And most of that is in the city of Los Angeles, and we would argue a lot of that is in the San Fernando Valley, which in fact is remote from LAX. The appropriate comparison would probably say that these communities have growth 3 times the total growth in the communities in the vicinity of LAX. Next. Similar comparison on the growth in employment. There will be double the growth in new jobs projected in those communities as compared to the communities in the vicinity of LAX. In other words, the growth in the region is not near LAX. The growth in the region is remote from LAX. In fact, it is in the regions of Southern California most remote from LAX. It makes little sense to try to serve those markets with an expanded LAX. Instead, we should use the airports which are in the middle of the growth regions. This slide will show you where some of these green areas will have basically triple the new population added as the yellow areas near LAX and double the jobs. And they have one, here's George up here, wants to be a cargo airport because the I-15 runs right by it. It's the heaviest amount of truck traffic in the region goes up the I-15. Right here is Norton, where my father worked when I was a kid. That airport aspires to be something like what Burbank is now. This is March. My father is buried right about there. Personal note, I grew up in the Inland Empire. March wants to be a cargo airport. Palm Springs, which is really out here, but we put it down here to keep it on the slide. It already is expanding. It wants to see its partners in the Inland Empire region grow. Ontario should be, of course, the hub in this region. El Toro and John Wayne here. This traffic all now predominantly goes to LAX. It makes no sense for the for the Orange County area to burden the communities around LAX for the benefit of their commerce when they can have their own airports in their own region. And of course, LAX is our hub. We have satellites at Long Beach, at Burbank, and we could have a satellite up here in Palmdale, which is going to triple in population, and Palmdale's industries are very high tech. As you may recall, this is where the Skunk Works are. Edwards Air Base is out there. This is a high-tech community with great needs for air travel. Even though LAX market will experience less than 1/4 of the region's growth, they propose to claim more than half of the new air traffic, while Cities like the Inland Empire, North LA County, which will have more than half the population and nearly 40% of the job growth, are being allocated in the regional transportation plan. Only 15% of the new aviation trips, and most of that goes to Ontario Airport, also owned by the City of Los Angeles. Believe me, March, Norton, George, and Palmdale are feeling quite neglected in this process. Clearly, the growth, the expansion of LAX will occur by drawing more and more people from remote parts of the region to LAX at the expense of the quality of life and environment of nearby communities, and expense of those other airports and those communities' economies. We believe that is not fair and it's not necessary. Go on to the next slide, I think. One of our goals is going to be to convince the majority of the LA City Council to vote no on the plan. We think this is an achievable goal. More than half of the LA City Council members come from a background that demonstrates environmental concerns or concerns with environmental justice. The LA City Council is, in fact, I believe, a far more intelligent, responsible body than at any time in the 40 years that I've been involved with watching this political process, and I think there's a majority that is reachable on that city council. There are several who, Mike Hernandez, Cindy Misikowski, as well as Ruth Galanter, who has spoken out in favor of more regional solutions already. We think that the momentum is building there, that we could win a majority here. Of course, there are 2 seats on the city council filled on June 8th. There's a good possibility that there will be one more good prospect for our cause on that city council. Of course, we also have to influence whoever becomes the mayor. Our key organizing plan is to build an alliance with both communities and constituencies throughout the region, take our case to the public and the press and the media, and other members of governmental institutions like SCAG, the state legislature, congressional delegation, and ultimately the City Council. We have been doing that, making presentations virtually every Tuesday night for the last year, and have, as I've told you, had great success, so much so that the process at the LA Department of Airports has been certainly knocked to its knees, not yet defeated, but we think we have the momentum that we need to build the coalition, that we need to show the City of Los Angeles that it needs to regard the rest of its region not as its followers, but as its partners in this process. Certainly Los Angeles is a leading partner in this regional partnership, but it is not the only dog on the road that cares about its future. It's not the big dog anymore it once thought it was. Southern California Association of Governments is a key part of this effort because the regional transportation plan governs the allocation of federal and some state dollars for transportation purposes. LAX doesn't get SCAG to approve what it wants. It's going to have a hard time financing its project. And therefore, this body becomes a key organizing objective for us. We spend many days at important meetings at the Aviation Task Force and other meetings. Well, incidentally, SCAG's Regional Council currently is the only opportunity that communities like yours have to actually vote on the expansion of LAX. That may change given that yesterday in the state Senate, Senator Deborah Bowen, who represents the South Bay, succeeded in getting the Senate to adopt her proposal calling for an examination of the feasibility of creating a regional airport authority that would have a direct authority over the development of airports in the region. City of LA, if that were to become law, City of Los Angeles would have to seek the approval of that authority. Deborah's measure is a feasibility study. It places it on the table, but she got a 21 to 12 vote in the Senate on that measure, on the first time that measure was brought before the Senate, which was a very, very encouraging surprise to all of us about how much support that idea was able to garner in the Senate. This is the unreadable resolution that we send to and bring to city councils. I'll read the therefore. Pass out to you. It says that the communities of Southern California join together. Let's see. City of, for example, Monterey Park calls upon other communities of Southern California to join together in developing a regional airport plan for Southern California that constrains LAX to operate within the capacity of its existing facilities and develops the capacity of the many other commercial airports in Southern California to serve the expanding air commerce marketplace. That is the resolution we have had about 67 cities, counties, and agencies approve. Our goal will be to have over 100 by the end of the summer. That will begin to show a very strong direction, if we think, from the region, and send a strong message to the City of Los Angeles and to the state legislature. Very proud of the fact that Monterey Park, its initiative, I must say, in fact, the fine council member in the audience's initiative brought it to the agenda of the Monterey Park City Council. City Council approved it, and frankly, there were a number of remarks that we jotted down and have been using in our wrap ever since from council members here that were particularly insightful characterizations of the situation. We hope that you can help us get other nearby communities here, Alhambra, Montebello, Temple City, others in this area, share problems with the flight path and the overhead flights to join us in this resolution. That you can be a force for communicating to those council members, and that's what we would ask of you, is that as political leadership in your communities, you can say to the other regional councils and other Democratic clubs or even Republican clubs or other associations, civic and political associations in these communities, ask them to join you. We'd love to have you adopt the same resolution and then ask others to join you and help us take this up to the city councils in the region, because this is where this battle will be fought and won, is on the city council level throughout the cities of Southern California. I'll be happy to answer any questions about our efforts, our successes, where we're at and where we're going. Yes? Yes, I don't think I have it here. It's cities, counties, and agencies representing cities like councils of government. I'm sorry, she asked about where the list, if there was a list of the cities, and the answer is yes. So if... They've signed the resolution. Yes, that have approved the resolution. Yeah. Yes.
Every city would oppose an airport in their own backyard. Are you aware of any cities that are stepping forward, urging?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. In fact, the whole basis of this coalition effort is that there are cities who are in the built-out urban environments under flight paths like LAX who don't want the burden, but there are many communities in which the flight paths don't go over residential areas. For example, if you looked at March and Norton and Ontario for the most part, and certainly Palmdale, the way those communities have developed, they do not have dense urban environments under the flight path the way LAX and Burbank and Long Beach do. So the communities that have dense urban environments, they don't want the airports, but communities which have open land under the flight path see the economic development opportunity. They've got the opportunity to plan their communities to avoid those kind of conflicts with residential areas. Yes? No, it hasn't gone as, the question was, has the LAX project gone as far as creating architectural drawings and the like? And they've created schematics for 3 different proposals. Those are being used as the basis for an environmental impact report, but they haven't gone further than that. There's nothing in the way of architectural sketches of how they envision it to look, but there aren't genuine renderings. It hasn't gotten that far in the process. And as I told you earlier, there is some reason to think they may be withdrawing those proposals and looking at others.
Something that piques our interest here in Monterey Park is that over the last couple of years, you suddenly have this volume of low-flying aircraft. And there, I've been here 26 years, and years ago, you never used an airplane. Now, sometimes you count like every 2-3 minutes, a low-flying aircraft, and it's my understanding that the aircrafts take off from LAX west over the ocean, and they land coming from the west. And I can't figure out why an airplane path is going eastbound over Monterey Park and then make a sharp right turn and head towards San Diego, why they aren't making that turn over the ocean. And I don't understand why this is suddenly.
Well, they approach LAX from this direction because the prevailing wind, the question has to do with why are we getting in this area lots of low-flying flights? Why, for example, is the approach pattern to LAX from this direction? The primary reason why the approach pattern to LAX from this direction is because of prevailing winds. Direction of wind is very important for maintaining the loft on an aircraft, and it's an important part of flying an airplane safely. So they take off into the wind and they try to land into the wind. In the evening, when the wind directions change, in the late evening, they both take off and land over the ocean, but most of the daytime and much of the early evening, they take off and they land in this direction to go into the wind. Why they're flying lower now, I don't know. I have no idea.
Over the years, we never used to hear air traffic here.
It's when the airport is foggy and we're in their landing circle.
They try to get below the haze,
About a year and a half ago, I spent a lot of time calling around trying to find out who is responsible for this, and I really got the runaround. I got directed to the LA, to the Los Angeles noise statement, that they said, well, that's the airport saying, when I call the airport, they say it's the FAA. When I call the FAA, they say, well, you have to talk to your congressperson. And one of the things that along with all of this, I have stacks of, papers, is they said that they do have some planes that are quieter than others, and that they don't have to be flying so low with, full throttle flaps down and all that. And it seems very difficult to pin down who to call, who's responsible. And I would like to know what group, where you can go to meet. I live in Montebello. What group that you can go to that's actually taking action, and because I want to get involved in this. I'm really angry.
well, we are taking action to block the expansion in terms of issues like flight patterns and governing that. In the South Bay area, there is a special committee that has been created by the FAA to involve those communities because they're complaining so much. My advice to you about that would be to contact, and I can give you numbers of people to contact who are involved with that South Bay committee, and see if you can't get a similar committee with the FAA to try to address your complaints. Even if we defeat the expansion of LAX, the existing LAX will remain, and the question of how aircraft behave will still be an issue for you. So we'll give you that. We'll give you. If we don't have it with us, we'll get back to you.
I gave him my name and address, so I would like to have it.
Well, I'm just thinking about the regionalization of freight, let's say, in particular. If the freight is brought mainly into LAX, then it has to be trucked elsewhere. And we talk about the environmental impact. It really makes sense to regionalize and bring in that cargo to the areas that it's going to serve rather than trucking it and having not only the pollution, but the damage to the freeways and so forth, that goes on with the truck traffic right now.
Well, especially cargo whose final destination is outside the Southern California area, where it might be going to Arizona Arizona or Nevada or other parts, other states. Carrying that cargo to the more easterly airport so that it can be delivered by train or truck to other western states makes a whole lot more sense than traipsing across the Southern California basin in order to deliver it. One of the issues in cargo, of course, is that a fair amount of cargo comes in the belly of passenger aircraft. So the issue of where passenger aircraft opportunities or airports are located are a key question in cargo. But increasingly, as much as 60% now, cargo comes in dedicated freighters, such as the UPSs and the DHLs and the airbornes and so on, because so much of industry is looking forward to what they call just-in-time delivery, which means that they don't have to have big warehouse storage capability in order to deal with their stock. In fact, the just-in-time deliverers, the UPSs, become flying warehouses for many manufacturers. And that's part of keeping their competitive edge. Computer technology has made that possible to track that kind of delivery system. They expect that just-in-time delivery, that dedicated cargo, is going to be about 80% of the cargo in 20 years from now. So airports like March and George, which want to be cargo-only airports, believe that they have an increasingly big opportunity in the marketplace as a result.
That's another question, unless someone has an answer.
We'll come back to you.
Are you working on newspaper and TV publicity?
Yes, we have. The question is, are we working on newspaper and television efforts and press? Yes, we've had quite a lot of success, in fact, with both television and print media and radio. We had a press conference, about 6 weeks ago that had we finally ended up on like 8 television news stations, about 10 radio stations. I believe that our press conference was carried in over a dozen newspapers. We've got a fair amount of that right here. We've been doing regular stints on a number of cable public affairs programs and KCEP, the NPR station, the public television station in the region has done a very excellent piece on the debate about airports in the region. So the media has definitely we've caught their attention. In fact, the Wall Street Journal has written several articles about our efforts already. There's some major media very interested in doing a kind of big deal story of the 60-minute variety.
I think Vern had his hand up.
Yeah.
It may sound nutty, but I remember hearing of studies of an offshore airport. Have they ever considered using one of the Channel Islands for?
Some people have proposed using Treasure Island in the harbor area, but it really isn't necessary because we have existing airports, and these existing airports are in the high-growth areas. We should locate our facilities where the markets are so as to assure their maximum efficiency. And because the growth in the region already has a number of existing easily adapted facilities, we do not have to go the route of looking for filling in Santa Monica Bay. In San Francisco, they are looking at filling in part of San Francisco Bay to create another runway, and I think that's a tragedy that's really quite unnecessary, and certainly unnecessary here.
But it does take care of pollution.
A huge part of the pollution attributed to airports is coming from ground access, vehicles that come and go. And so the key thing in planning our airports, remember airports also generate a lot of job activity around them. One of the key problems with concentrating our airports is we well know that the Southern California sprawl is legendary, and that the most perverse part of that is that people have to drive so far from where they live to where they work, whether it's Palmdale or Riverside into LA County. And one of the reasons why it's so important to have those airports out there used so that jobs will develop in those communities, and those new people who are going to live there can work closer to home and not have to commute on our freeways into LA and Orange County, because that's what creates the impossible congestion and the irresolvable air pollution in Southern California, is that absolutely unnecessary driving that goes on. Similarly, with respect to truck traffic, having the truck traffic delivering the cargo, one, be the cleanest possible technology, but also being more proximate to, more rationally distributed according to where cargo is coming and going to.
Yes. What's the status of the El Toro development? The local citizens have been very forceful in trying to prevent that.
Actually, El Toro is, I think, in quite good political position. What we've heard a lot about the opposition and some modest success they've had in the courts, but in fact, the County Board of Supervisors there has voted 4 times to approve El Toro as an airport, and the voters of Orange County have approved the airport twice on propositions that were on the ballot. Of course, LAX has never had a vote by anyone to approve it, and certainly no ballot measure that's been approved by the citizens. So El Toro has been, in effect, approved by the governing body 4 times and by the people twice. And, of course, the opposition communities continue their efforts. They're going to try to put one more measure on the ballot in March, kind of a peculiar measure that is going to say something like requires 2/3 vote of the population to create any obnoxious use, such as jails, toxic dumps, and airports. So they're going to try to, I think that kind of effort looks to the voters like a scam. It looks like it's a deceptive way to achieve a singular end, and voters don't like those sorts of things. So I think that the Orange County voters are likely to reject that and support the airport again. And frankly, they should, because they need to have their own, each county should have both the opportunity and the responsibility for providing for their own air commerce and not have other counties, other regions bearing the burden of their benefits.
Where are you getting your funding for your efforts?
I am a consultant to the City of El Segundo. Our efforts are funded almost entirely by the City of El Segundo. We have had several other communities begin to show interest. Culver City and Santa Monica have put money into the efforts. Other communities have told us that they plan to put money into their budgets for this year to help out. Really, we've been doing our effort with Mary Beth and me and Mayor Mike Gordon and his colleagues. And those of you who might have seen Mayor Gordon make a presentation, he's a very fine speaker. He's very convincing. He used to be the executive director of the California Democratic Party. He's quite a skilled and fine speaker, very skilled at politics. So he's been very effective. But as an organizing team, it's just been Beth and me. Of course, we have Mike on his own dime organizing throughout the region, including his community, so we have to count him. But I think, we really do need, I think, 2 more people to work on this to do the kind of job that we need to do.
You mentioned that that Deborah Ball introduced legislation. Is there going to be companion legislation in the Assembly? And if there is there a number assigned, and should we begin to lobby our own Assembly person?
Yes, I mean, it's what SB 1060, I think, is what its number is now. It goes to the Assembly where it will get its detail. I mean, right now, it's a conceptual bill. And on the Assembly side, they will work out the details of what it means to examine the feasibility of this, and then it'll go back to the Senate for concurrence. So rather than a companion bill, this bill itself will be fleshed out on the Assembly side, where Deborah spent a number of years herself. She's got a lot of, I think, good relationships and understanding of how that process works there.
Dennis? I'd like to take one question, get one question in. You talk about a regional airport plan for Southern California. Actually, don't we need a regional transportation plan for Southern California, which would include not just air, but rail transit? I understand the state of California is now looking seriously at some extended rail transportation between the major cities.
Yeah.
Shouldn't that enter into the geometry or the calculus of transportation?
We've had an entity, Southern California Association of Governments, that's been responsible for creating a regional transportation plan for some time. Part of the problem or the failure of those efforts to be as successful as we wish has more to do with the developing or the failure to develop the political relationships between communities. You can't really have a good planning process. For example, if the communities of this region don't have a good understanding about what the communities of the Inland Empire, Orange County, or elsewhere need so that they can have an effective give and take. Part of it is a reflection simply of the vastness of the region. But one of the things that I think, I'm sorry, I should be repeating the questions is what.
Talking in the mic. We're not picking
Well,
you up
raise the
at all.
mic a little.
Sorry?
I said we can't pick you up unless you talk closer to the microphone.
Raise the mic a little.
These people that ask the questions out here, unless you repeat it, we don't get any response.
I'm sorry. Sometimes you just think you're talking to the people who are here. It's easy to fall into that. The question was, not only a regional airport plan, don't we need a genuine regional transportation plan? That might include, for example, the development of an effective regional rail system. The answer to that is clearly yes, and I was trying to go into something of my understanding as to why those efforts have not been as successful to date as we would have hoped. The institutions created, first of all, Southern California is very vast. It's an enormous challenge to really put together an effective system. But it's also an enormous challenge to create the kind of political dialogue between the communities of the region necessary to get the kind of agreements that are required, the kind of understanding required, so that people can come to a plan that everybody buys off on. One of the things I think that's going to be an outgrowth of our efforts to develop a coalition for a regional airport plan is building those kinds of relationships. For example, I don't think the South Bay and the Inland Empire communities ever had much of a dialogue before, but guess what? Now they're all on a first-name basis, and they have been, having a very effective dialogue not only about airports, but about things related to airports, which include rail systems, for example. For example, there's a debate now in the region about high-speed rail and maglev, intra-regional maglev rail technology, which is another form of high-speed rail. And all of that is closely related to the airport development in the region because those systems are typically envisioned as serving airports as well as other parts of the region. So the communities who are caring about airports are suddenly having dialogue about high-speed rail and its various forms. Other kinds of transportation systems or issues, for example, a key part of a transportation debate is land use patterns and how spread out we are in Southern California. One of the things that Southern California Association of Governments, I think, is becoming increasingly effective in is advocating for what is some places called smart growth or livable communities, which has to do with alternatives to simply sprawling in Southern California. And I think that there's a genuine change of attitude developing among the communities and the leadership in those communities in Southern California. And one of the outgrowths of that is that the Vice President now is leading an effort to spark the debate over smart growth in the region. And Phil Angelides, who used to be the chair of the California Democratic Party, is himself going around and making presentations about the importance of smart growth in Southern California. So the answer is yes, but what it takes to make that work is partly money, partly improved technologies, but mostly it takes political will and political agreement, and that only happens when people have learned how to dialogue with each other and understand their needs. When we've all been isolated, it couldn't happen. We are becoming less isolated, and this issue, the airport planning, is helping to break down that isolation, and I think it's going to yield lots of very positive results for all of our communities. I think that's my last question.
Okay, and I think that Zane has certainly brought a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, and a very clear presentation to us. And we're really indebted to him. And
Thank you very much. We have, by the way, things to share with you on the table.
okay, so there's information here, and we're going to close the meeting in just a very short time. I do want to say one thing as a point of privilege. Our longtime member and friend, Fred Friedman, just received last night, for a lifetime of tireless effort on behalf of working people, an achievement award signed by the general manager and the president of District Council 6, and the International Brotherhood of Painters and Allied Trades District Council number 36. So I'd just like to have a nice round of applause for our longtime friend, Fred Friedman. Okay, now, while we were sitting here, and after I mentioned the propositions A and AA, we do have some lawn signs. If any of you want them, you can take one home. Please feel free to do so. And if you want them and we don't have any more, we'll get them for you. Is there anything else? Does anyone have any other? Dennis?
Is it possible then for you to consider placing on your agenda for adoption the resolution that we have here?
We could do that if, Vern, you want to do that as a body?
Yeah.
Okay? All right. Would somebody please make a proposal that we go on record in support of the,
Second.
okay? The motion's been made that this body, which consists of the United Democratic Club, the Monterey Park Democratic Club, and the Alhambra Democratic Club, calls upon the communities of Southern California, including Los Angeles, the City of Los Angeles, the counties of Los Angeles, Orange, San Bernardino, Riverside, and Ventura, and the state of California, and our congressional representatives to join together in developing a regional airport plan for Southern California that constrains LAX to operate within the capacity of its existing facilities and develops the capacity of many other commercial airports in Southern California to serve the expanding airport air commerce marketplace. So that's the,
Could you just make it Monterey Park and United Democrats, since Alhambra doesn't have anywhere near a quorum?
okay, corrected. The Monterey Park Democratic Club and the United Democratic Club. Okay, you've heard the motion, and there's a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, then, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried.
I'd like to make a suggestion that maybe Werner and anyone from the Alhambra Club request that your city councils have a presentation by this group so that then you can ask for a similar resolution.
Okay, if that, there's nothing further, and I'd entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Okay? Nina, did you have an announcement that you want to make?
I just wanted to pass out some literature and see if anybody wanted any signs. Or
Well,
anything.
I made the mention of the sign. Nina has literature concerning Proposition A and AA, and she'll pass it out or hand it out to you. Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much, one and all.